Welcome into the 14. This is the Thursday edition. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Blake Lovell, Barry Allen with me today. This will be a basketball/baseball episode. More baseball than hoops, but as always, Blake, the transfer portal just keeps on giving. Big news at Ole Miss and Vanderbilt last night. One good, one not so good.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can start with the good, and that is Ole Miss. Yeah, getting Jaemyn Brakefield, who was he's a former top 40 recruit last year, and really one of the best power forward type guys in the class, at 6'8", about 210 or so. I mean, went to Duke, and as we said, everybody's transferring, but now you see him head to Ole Miss, and it's a pretty significant pickup for Ole Miss because we talked about a lot of teams already this offseason, but that's a team we really haven't talked a lot about. Because I think they're one that you still don't really have a great feel of what they're going to look like next season. So that's a significant pickup for Kermit Davis and company. I think adding him to the mix, again, someone who certainly has the potential, certainly has a lot of things that he could do, and to potentially develop into a guy that plays in the NBA. So that's a big addition for Ole Miss, and I think it's what do you put around him now, and who else do they have coming back? Who else are they bringing in? I'm trying to think off the top of my head of the guys that they brought in this offseason. It's just, as we keep saying, there's just so much to keep up with in terms of who's still there. I mean, that's right. They added Ty Fagan. I forgot about that from Georgia. They've still got some good players coming back too. So that's a pretty big one, I think, there for Ole Miss.
Yeah, my goodness. Yesterday, we're talking about Vanderbilt as a potential NCAA tournament team. We're talking about the potential return of Scottie Pippen Jr., who's declared for the draft. We're talking about they've got Dylan Disu back. They've added 3 quality transfers. We think quality. I mean, 2 of them for sure, 1 maybe. And we talked about that team all last year, that they just needed a supporting cast with those 2 stars. Well, I think as people who have listened to the podcast know, Blake and I are located in the Nashville area, so we're pretty tied in on the Vanderbilt end. What I was told happened yesterday was that Dylan Disu, Vanderbilt's star forward, who I believe led the league in rebounding, had been leaning towards transferring. Talks to Scottie Pippen Jr. was not super optimistic that Scottie Pippen Jr. would be returning to Vanderbilt, maybe staying in the draft. And in any case, Vanderbilt now has lost Dylan Disu too, and my goodness, that is a huge setback for Vanderbilt, and I think NCAA, you can forget that now. NIT might be a struggle for them.
Yeah, real quickly, I was going to mention Nasir Brooks, the 7-footer from Miami, also committed to Ole Miss this past couple weeks, so that's another addition there for them. So they add some size to the Rebels. But yeah, I mean, on the Dylan Disu thing, I think the more I look at it, am I surprised that this is how this is all playing out? Not really, because, I think once we started to lean and say, we think Scottie Pippen is leaving, I think at that point, if you put your hat on and say, okay, well, what is Dylan Disu thinking right now? Even with them, adding some of the players they've added, I still think that's one to where, the more you think about it, a Texas kid, obviously we know there's been a coaching change there. I just think that the more I think about it now, it makes sense. I'm not surprised. We've talked about the one-time transfer rule, and boy, I could go down a rabbit hole on that right now, just based on everything we've talked about over the past several weeks, and really what things look like right now. I mean, we're getting close to, I think it's 1,400, almost 1,450 on the transfer
1,435 according to verbal commits.
Well,
so
yeah, I mean, that's it's just, it's difficult, and I think for Vanderbilt specifically, yeah, if you're going to lose your top 2 players, and we've talked about, it's great to have Robbins coming in, it's great to have Chapman coming in, and those guys, but boy, when you lose your top 2 players, and as we made the argument, I think before, I mean, you're talking about 2 of the potentially top 10 players in the SEC next season. If you're not adding those guys and you're getting rid of them, I don't think that you're going to have enough around everyone else right now to be able to make up that kind of ground. And as we said too, I mean, we said it yesterday, this is not a season where even if Vanderbilt had Pippen and Disu next year, it was still going to be a challenge to probably get above 8th or so in the league because of how strong all of these other teams are going to be. So now, if you take them out of the equation, boy, that's that all of a sudden puts you back there near the bottom, and that's not an ideal place to be in because of what I said. I mean, I said I made the statement, and maybe I'll ultimately prove to be wrong. But I just think that this could be the strongest the SEC's been since that 18-19 season, and potentially even better than that, just based on the transfers that are coming in, what some of these teams could look like, at least on paper to this point. So it's a significant hit for Vanderbilt. There's no other way to put it. And as we said, you feel like at this point it's simply just a matter of waiting and hearing that Scottie Pippen is not going to come back. And so that, I mean, look, if he does, I mean, if the wild chance that he does, I mean, that obviously our conversation changes a little bit. But the fact that Disu is leaving, I don't think that's good at all, because he was the guy we kept pointing to and saying, boy, that's the type of player you need, I think, to win right now at Vanderbilt, just based on his skill set and, the big man, right? That's what we talked about. Like, Vanderbilt hasn't really had a guy that can do some of the things they've done, even though they have added Robbins now. But it's just, that's a significant hit to their roster.
Well, we have talked about how we thought it was going to really be an uphill struggle for Jerry Stackhouse to get it done at Vanderbilt. I think both of us had changed our tune, and again, with what they had accumulated and who they had coming back just a couple of days ago, assuming that Pippen had returned, again, we had changed our tune on that. Now I'm finding it very difficult for him to get this turned around, absent a couple of immediate impact transfers that he lands in the coming weeks potentially, which I don't know who that would be, but I'm just saying I think I've gone back to pessimistic on that getting turned around under his direction.
Well, and you know what? They actually, and the thing is, right, they got some good news yesterday that was made official, like in terms of their actual coaching hires. Like, I think he's put together a staff there that's a pretty good staff now. When you look at Ed Conroy and, Michael Curry, who, former NBA guy, and, that, I think it's a staff that's actually pretty good. But, if you're, that's the thing too, where I know there's been a lot of frustration with Jerry Stackhouse, and I know probably it's easy at this point for fans to sort of blame this Disu thing on him and all this other stuff. But I'm telling you, this one-time transfer thing, we knew as soon as this was something that it was made official and said, hey, go, like basically just hit the go button and everyone can just start moving around wherever they want to. I just always think that this is one that before the transfer era and before things really picked up to this point, I think you could have said, okay, well, something was wrong there, maybe coach-wise. Why is this guy leaving? But now I think it's so hard to just pin this on a coach and say, well, it's got to be the coach's fault that this guy's leaving. I just don't think that's the case. I think it's just we see the nature of where things are headed. And, I get support and wanting to allow kids the flexibility to do what they want. But I'm telling you, like, this is becoming a challenge in terms of, we talked about the Roy Williams thing and him deciding to retire. I think he got out at the right time, because I think this is something that it is going to become a challenge. And even for me, like as a fan, as someone like us who covers this sport, like it is becoming a very interesting time, because you're looking around and saying, I don't know how you keep up with all these players that are moving around. And it's so different because, you invest in some of these teams and you say, okay, like let's take Mississippi State as an example. Like they've got that sophomore trio that's coming back. Hopefully they're all coming back at this point. They could still leave, who knows? But like when you see these players that have played together, and it's like, okay, well, you start to project ahead and say, all right, well, that team's going to be really good next year. But then, you look at players that leave and you're like, okay, well, now you're basically starting over again. How do you project this team? And it's so hard now. And I don't know. Like, I know Barry's voiced his frustrations with it. And I've always kind of just sort of been right there in the middle, because I get the argument about how coaches can leave and they don't have to sit out and all this other stuff. And I completely understand that. But man, it is becoming a very interesting time in college basketball. And, is it for the better? Is it not for the better? I think you would have some pretty strong arguments probably on both sides there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we could do an hour just on that topic alone. And there's always self-correcting property to things like this, right? Like in 7 or 8 years ago when defense was ruining everything. I say defense, it was the fouling, and the game got slowed down to a crawl and there was no flow. You saw the rule book loosen up, and basketball is a lot more free flowing now. and a better product than it was 7 or 8 years ago. I don't know what the remedy is for the transfer portal. We may be in for a couple of years of, frankly, worse product, because I think that when you can't track the teams and the players from year to year, like when I grew up in the 80s, the great thing about SEC basketball is the teams were competitive. You kind of knew, like even if you weren't an Ole Miss fan or a Georgia fan, if you followed the league, chances were coming the season, you could name 5 or 6 players on that team coming in, just having watched them the year before when you had the round robin schedule. And if you followed your favorite team, you knew who the other teams were. That is completely gone out the window. I think the continuity is what made it so much fun to follow in the 80s and the 90s. That's now gone, and I'm interested to see, because I think eventually at some point the pendulum will swing back, because there's too much money invested in the game. There's too many fans, and the NCAA, the NCAA.
There's another conversation.
That's like the moment that I said that dawned on me. That's like the Cousin Eddie comment from Christmas Vacation. If you believe in your mom and your dad, if you remember that one. But I guess my point is I'm interested to see how this comes back around eventually in a few years, because I have a feeling something will happen to restore some order. God knows what that's going to be. But
yeah.
In any case, a couple more things. The aptly named Quentin Post has left Mississippi State. And did we talk yesterday about who was it that went from Arkansas to Auburn?
Yeah, we sort of mentioned Desi Seals. I mentioned him a little bit. Yeah, and I think, like you said, that just adds another guard for Auburn. The Quentin Post thing, I mean, we've talked about it just in terms of all the players that Mississippi State have added. I mean, he's a 7-footer, underclassman, but I think as you see, Garrison Brooks come in and that kind of stuff, you're probably looking up and saying, okay, probably not getting that playing time. And they've got other guys there. I mean, you've got Toulouse Smith and, other guys like that are there and are going to be playing more minutes. So I can't say that's obviously a surprise very much on that. But yeah, I mean, I think overall it's just, this is the nature of where things are now. And you kind of said it, and I won't be long-winded, but it's just, I think the team chemistry aspect too, like it's going to make it, I think now in this landscape, it makes it so much harder to project how good teams are going to be, because you look at some of these teams and they are going to have potentially a starting 5 that, has never played together. But I mean, really, in many cases, like guys who have never actually played together, maybe a couple of them have, but there probably could be more than, I mean, there could be 3 of that 5 that have never stepped on the floor together in an actual game. And so I think that always makes it kind of fascinating. That's kind of the Kentucky, I guess, thing where they bring in the new guys every year. You don't really know how the chemistry is going to be, but it's like that for everyone now because of all the different players. And let's face it too, like, we don't know. And the thing is, when you have some of these guys that are transferring and all this, look, there are people in their ears convincing them that they're going to get better playing time or they're going to be a star elsewhere. And as we've seen so many times, it just doesn't work that way. And I think that's the problem. It's knowing that it's not all these transfers. This number can be 1,450 or wind up at 1,600 or whatever it's going to be. But, the majority of those guys that are going to actually have probably the success that they were looking for, or actually be able to maybe find a better spot. Like it's a crapshoot, isn't it? I mean, you can transfer to another school, but I think you never really know how this thing's going to work out. And again, I'm not saying that players shouldn't have the option to do that. But I think it is a matter of, some guys I think are leaving for the right reasons, but I think there are probably other guys, and maybe it's not entirely their fault. Like I said, there's probably people in their ears saying, hey, you can go be a star here and not just be a role player on this team here. You can go be a star and shoot the ball 25 times a game at another place. And so I think it's so hard to kind of, I guess, try to figure everything out. And maybe, like I said earlier, I get, and I'm sure, like, it's not just Vanderbilt fans that are frustrated. There are other, teams that have been decimated too with transfers. But I get the notion to be frustrated maybe with a coach, but I think this is something that's much bigger than that at this point, to where I'm not sure, it doesn't matter who the coach is. There are so many elements at play now with the one-time transfer rule, with all the other stuff. I think it's just hard to keep players no matter who you are.
A friend of mine was talking to a current SEC football coach on the subject of transfers the other day, and the comment was made that I'm not crazy about taking transfers. You're just taking on somebody else's problem. Now, I think that is probably oversimplifying it, but that's an interesting way to look at it, right?
Well, I mean, look, there are some situations like that. I mean, I think that's the thing is, sometimes that there are probably players that transfer. The coaches are like, well, maybe that's, one less thing to deal with because it is. And that's the thing, too, is, I mean, as we've said, this is not just this year. Like, this has been a trend. And so I think if you're a player that's coming in, and let's say you're a junior or even a senior, a grad transfer, like you've seen the evolution of transfers in college basketball just in your time in college. And you've said, oh, I remember 2 years ago when player A decided to, transfer from Texas to wherever, and all of a sudden he became, the player of the year in this other conference. And why can't that be me? Like, why can't I take, that route and be able to do this? And so, like, you have that tension, too, that has to be there. Because as we know, like, kids that are recruited to these levels, especially let's talk about the SEC, as we always say, like, these are not kids that, were sitting on the bench in high school. Like, these are guys that were stars. And when they come into college, they want to be the star, and that's what we always talk about kind of with the Kentucky dynamic. But now, it's that way, I think, in a lot of other places, because as we've said, we've seen how the SEC is recruited, and I just think that, now it's so much easier to where if you're used to being the star in high school and you come to college and all of a sudden you're the third guy off the bench, you have the freedom to do whatever you want now. You don't have to sit back and say, I'm just going to accept being, a very good role player on a winning team. I can say, hey, I want to go back to being the star, and you know what? Maybe we only win 15 games during the year, but I'm going to get my points, right? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that's the way it is for everybody, and please don't take that the wrong way. Like, I'm just saying there are situations like that, and I think the ease of movement, like being able to move around anywhere you want now, I just think that opens that aspect a lot more to where you do have some situations like that, and I think it's just, again, I'm not going to sit here and try to sound like, just someone who's saying that this is just a terrible thing, because I'm all for the freedom, the, flexibility to do what you want. And obviously the NCAA is moving towards that. But I just think that from a team standpoint and from actually trying to project what teams are going to do, it's so hard, because I just think that you're having to kind of start over in some places, and you're having to kind of rebuild that chemistry that I just don't think necessarily you can build throughout the course of an offseason. It's going to be actual on-court action in games against other opponents, and I think that's why you'll see, some teams maybe get off to slower starts with a lot of new players. Some teams get off to faster starts, and I think it makes it a lot more hard to predict how a season's going to unfold with just so many moving pieces throughout the country.
We've got about 25 minutes left today. I'm up against the deadline. And so with that, we got a lot of baseball to talk. I'm going to run down what I think the standings in the league are going to look like at year's end in baseball. Before I do that, I want to turn that to Barry Allen, because I know we've got a couple of items of news and notes that he's got down that we need to get to today. So with that, I'll turn that over to Barry.
Well, good morning, guys. I guess the one thing is, two series start tonight. South Carolina hosting Arkansas and Ole Miss hosting LSU. One of the four remaining series for Arkansas against SEC Eastern Division teams. A good series for both. First time that Arkansas has been to South Carolina since 2016, and the Razorbacks were swept in their last trip to Founders Park in that year. Two teams that joined the league in 1992. One thing for Arkansas this weekend is Connor Nolan has returned from an injury. He threw in relief last weekend for Arkansas in the Texas A&M series. Not listed as a starter this weekend. They do have a TBA listed for Game 3. I don't know if that would be him. I don't know if that would be Patrick Wicklander. I don't know if that would be Zebulon Vermillion at this point, but they're going to go Bolden and Pallette in Games 1 and 2. And South Carolina is pretty much staying with the same way they've been for quite a while. Thomas Farr, Brandon Jordan, and Will Sanders. A couple of interesting things from these two teams is just, as trends go for the year, I guess 5 weeks is enough to trend. But Arkansas 3-2 in SEC openers. South Carolina 1-4 in the first game of an SEC series. But in 3 of those 4 losses, they've come back to win the series. Game 2, Arkansas is 4-1. Likewise, the Gamecocks. And in game 3, Arkansas is 4-1 in those games. South Carolina is 5-0 in the third game of an SEC series. And I think that's mainly because of the dude they have on the mound in Will Sanders, who's 6-1 with a 2.11 earned run average. They moved him to the starting rotation against Florida, and that has seemed to really lift the Gamecocks. They're 9-1 on game 2 and game 3 in SEC series, and that's why they've had a lot of success in winning the series. In fact, their only game 2, game 3 loss was the opener against Vanderbilt back in the first weekend of the season when they were no hit by Jack Leiter. So good bounce back for the Gamecocks. That should be a very interesting series. The 2 teams, just from a historical standpoint, met in the 1985 College World Series. Arkansas won the game 1-0 in 14 innings out in Omaha. So a fun nugget for that series. And then the other series that starts tonight is LSU at Ole Miss. LSU on the road, struggling. They really need a series win. I'm just not sure it's going to happen this weekend. But the big news in Oxford this weekend is tonight the jersey retirement, number 11 of Rebel baseball and basketball great and former head coach Don Kessinger, true gentleman, shortstop for the Cubs. He was a player manager for the White Sox when they wore the black shorts back in the 70s and 80s. But terrific human being. Great to see that happening for him. I'll tell you a story about him. I've known him for years and years. And if you're a Cubs fan, man, this guy's tremendous, tremendous person, tremendous player. But Gray, his grandson, played in the Under Armour All-American game at Wrigley Field. And they went up a couple of days early and toured Chicago, and they had a workout day. And Don obviously got down on the field during the workout. Of course, people were talking to him, and the Chicago media were all over him. And he's out at shortstop. He and Gray just kind of have a moment, and they kind of walk around, and they're kind of walking around Wrigley Field, and he's kind of telling him, well, this is where Ernie Banks was, and this is where this happened, and this is where this happened. And they got the shortstop where Gray played and where Don played. And they were just kind of standing around at shortstop, and he said Gray looked at him, and he looked at Gray, and he goes, I got one piece of advice for you. And he said, what's that, Granddad? He goes, this is my dirt. Don't screw it up. And that kind of resonates when your granddad's the shortstop for the Chicago Cubs and you're at Wrigley Field. And so Don told me that story one time. He said, it's my dirt. Don't screw it up. And I think Gray had a pretty good game and had a good career at Ole Miss and now, drafted. But Ole Miss going with Hoglund, Nikhazy, and Drew McDaniel for the second weekend in a row. And I think it's interesting that Doug Nikhazy, the 5 SEC starts he's made, Ole Miss is 5-0 in his SEC starts, but just 4-6 in the games not started by Nikhazy on the weekend. So they're trying to get righted after losing 3 series in a row. And then LSU going with Marceau, Labus, and TBA in game 3 of that series. Tigers have struggled at 2-3 in season openers, and then they're 1-4 in games 2 and 3 of their series. So that's how we kind of get started tonight with 2 series, and then the big thing with the Don Kessinger jersey retirement in Oxford. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, a few thoughts on what you just said. Will Sanders has had a terrific year for Carolina. We moved him into our pitcher rankings this week at number 8. I think that's well-deserved. He has been really good in SEC play, and that rotation, I think, we talk about Vanderbilt, we talk about State's pitching, we talk about Ole Miss, we've talked about Florida preseason. I think South Carolina's rotation is probably, and basically it's pitching because it's got some really good bullpen arms. I think if they've probably been undercovered on this podcast so far, and I just wanted to give that a mention. The Arkansas thing, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out because Bolden really has not been a guy that's had a long track record of starting with success for them. He's pitched, 68 innings over 3 years at Arkansas, dating back to 2018. Connor Nolan was, I guess, to borrow a major league term, really more an opener than he was a starter for Arkansas back in 2019 when the Hogs went to the College World Series. His numbers were good. I think his ERA was around 370, but he made 17 starts and went like, I think 71 or 72 innings. So he wasn't staying in the game probably a whole lot longer than just the first time around the order. But I'm interested to see. I mean, that's been our question on Arkansas all along. I think 1 to 9, that might be the most balanced lineup, either them or Ole Miss probably in the conference. But the pitching has been where we've had the issues, and I want to see what this does if they can make some tweaks to kind of shore that up, Barry.
Yeah, touch on Sanders again. He may be one of the most underrated, arms in the league. You look at him, what he's done this year. I mean, there's 2 guys with more wins than Sanders in the league, and their names are Rocker and Leiter. Then there's a healthy list of 6 guys at Will Sanders, Kevin Kopps, Arkansas guy, Chase Lee at Alabama, Will Helmers at LSU, Jack Leftwich at Tennessee, and Sean Hunley Jack Leftwich at Florida and Sean Hunley at Tennessee. I mean, we're talking upper echelon guys in this league, and Sanders has really developed for them. And, if they can, you're going to win a lot of series when your number 3 starter is 5-0, or you're 5-0 and the number 3 starts, and you're going to win a lot of games there. Arkansas, to me, this weekend, their offense is a little bit better to me than South Carolina's. Has been more consistent. Both teams can hit home runs, and I know there's some weather issues there this weekend. There's going to be weather issues about everywhere this weekend as far as rain and stuff. So they may, South Carolina has their spring game Saturday, and baseball's final game is there. It could be a situation where they have to double up and play 2 games on Friday and end the series on Friday. Just depends on how the weather goes. They'll make that decision, at the appropriate time. But, the wind there could really get out. I mean, this could be a high-scoring series because both of these teams can hit home runs. And South Carolina needs to get Wes Clark back on track as well. And Arkansas's pitching, the bullpen has been good. We mentioned Kevin Kopps and Will Sanders, South Carolina's number 3 starter. Kevin Kopps is, guy out of the pen. I joked a few weeks ago, when Dave Van Horn sees trouble, he calls the cops. And, this guy's got 6 wins and 5 saves and has been a real key for he's held their bullpen and he's held their pitching staff together. And if they can get things going in the right direction with their pitching staff, this is a dangerous team as the season unfolds.
Yeah, calling the cops has got to be my favorite expression involving SEC baseball all year. I hope that they've got some good music for that in Arkansas. Maybe the police squad theme song or something when he comes in.
Or his walkout music might be the theme to Cops, Bad Boys. Yes. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? And
yes.
I hope it is. I've not heard that, but that would be kind of funny. I would like that.
We need that to happen. Barry, I've run down. If you don't have any more things on the agenda for today with baseball, I've got my projected standings for the SEC. I've taken all the games that have been played, made predictions on all the rest of the series, and come up with what I think the final standings will look like. We can record this, everybody out there, and you can have a laugh at my expense later. But I thought it'd be a fun exercise if everyone wants to play along here.
I'm all for it. Let's do that.
Okay, at the top, I've got a 3-way tie for the conference standings at the end of the season between Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and Tennessee. Applying the tiebreakers, I have it going in that order, with Vandy getting the 1, Arkansas the 2, and Tennessee the 3. I've got Arkansas winning 4 of its 5 series, losing 1 at Tennessee. I've got the Vols winning 4 of their 5 series, losing at South Carolina to end the season. And in the middle, I've got Tennessee sweeping Alabama on the road. I don't think I meant to do that. So let me change that a little bit. This is making for great podcasting. Okay. If you change that, then you got Vandy and Arkansas tied. So I don't know how the tiebreaker goes at that point. I think it goes against, record against top team in the league?
Well, then that would be, because they don't play
each other, right.
Which is not unprecedented, because that has happened bukus of times over the years where the league division champions don't play. But then it would be, obviously the number one team, and you're both number one. So then it would go to I think it would go to number 3 through 14 in descending order. So, and if one team didn't play the other one, then you move to the next one, it's eliminated. It's a complicated process. And then if it's still tied, then it goes division record versus East versus West. And then if it's still tied after that, then Greg Sankey gets the 2-headed quarter and he flips it, and somebody unfortunately calls heads or tails, they lose the coin toss. But at that point, you're still league champions. You're just really trying to be the 1 or the 2 seed in the tournament, which I don't know that makes a whole lot of difference at that point in time. But they would both get a trophy when they get to Hoover. So,
well, in this case, Arkansas might get the 1 because I've got Arkansas taking 2 or 3 from Tennessee. No, I take that back. Tennessee's winning that series because that's in Knoxville. I've really botched this year. I'm sorry.
So that would mean Vanderbilt would be the 1 and Arkansas would be the 2, and I don't think anybody'd argue with you on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say that the tiebreaker would be South Carolina and Arkansas. Well, they will play. So basically, let me cut to the chase. And this is how complicated it's going to get. I'm going to have Vandy and Arkansas tied with 20 wins. I'm going to have Tennessee, South Carolina, and Mississippi State next with 19. So however you sort through the tiebreaker, Vanderbilt would have played all 3 teams. And Arkansas, I think, will have played all 3 teams as well. Arkansas swept Mississippi State earlier. Arkansas has got South Carolina this weekend and Tennessee to finish the season. So however the tiebreakers work out there. I've got the 6th seed Ole Miss standing alone with 18 wins. Then I go Florida standing alone as a 7 with 17 wins. I've got Georgia 15 wins is the 8th seed. No, I take that back. Alabama will be the 8th seed because I flipped that series. So Alabama will be the 8 with 16 wins. Georgia will be the 9 with 15. Then I go Kentucky at the 10 seed with 12. This will surprise you. I've got Auburn and LSU tied with 10 wins. Auburn, in that case, will get the tie break and get the 11 seed. LSU will be the 12. I've got A&M with 9 wins, and Missouri at 6 wins is 13 and 14. So if things go the way that I've got them going, those 2 teams will be at home. And I know Auburn, that's going to raise eyebrows, but Auburn ends its season with LSU at home, A&M at home, and at Missouri. I've got the Tigers taking 2 out of 3 in each of those. I've got them winning a game at Florida with Florida at home. I've got them winning a game at Georgia. So I've actually got Auburn winning 8 games of their last 15 to get that get one of the last 2 spots and get to Hoover.
Very doable, especially now that if what happened Tuesday night is the norm for the remainder of the season, Cody Greenhill moving back to the bullpen and being the closer. Now, all of a sudden, they've got somebody that can shut that game down in the 8th inning. They've not had that this year. And I think if you want to go back and archive and roll tapes, I think you'll find 3 guys that's been trying to get Cody Greenhill back in the bullpen for about 6 weeks now. And they finally listened to us. And he got a save, his 20th career save against Samford Tuesday night with a scoreless inning, a nice clean 15-pitch inning with a foul out, ground out, and a strikeout. And I know it's Samford, but hey, they blew a lead in the last inning last night against Jacksonville State, but got a walk-off in the 10th and beat Jacksonville State 8-7. So they, got Florida coming to town, the worst home team in the league, Auburn, at 0-6 against the worst road team in the league, Florida. Can you believe that I just said that? Can you believe that I just said Florida is the worst road team in the SEC at 1-5 in this SEC?
Wow.
Even Missouri has 2 road wins. Auburn has 2 road wins. Florida is 1-5 on the road in the SEC this year. So they're the worst road team taking on the worst home team. Auburn's the only team without a home win in the SEC. I mean, even Missouri has 2 and A&M has 2. So that'll be an interesting series in Auburn, but very doable for Auburn now that Cody Greenhill's moving to the pen, and he's confident there. Thought they might have to use him last night. One thing I thought they did, or was interesting last night, is Gonzalez, who's been their Sunday guy. He had to pitch 3 2/3 innings last night in the middle of the game, so I don't know what his availability will be this weekend against Florida, but certainly doable for Auburn with LSU and A&M at home. The two other teams they're fighting for in the bottom of the league. And then you mentioned that three-way tie in the middle or for third between Mississippi State, Tennessee, and South Carolina. Those top six teams you mentioned, South Carolina's got the most difficult path to me left in this deal. Their last five opponents have 48 wins. Vanderbilt's next five has 42 wins, and Arkansas's next five opponents have 41 wins. And I believe Arkansas is playing three of their last five on the road, at South Carolina, at LSU, at Tennessee. South Carolina has already been on the road three times. They'll have three home series with Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Tennessee. And then Vanderbilt, I think, has three home series remaining with Mississippi State, Alabama, and Kentucky. So their last two home series should be pretty good for them. Now, Tennessee, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss, they have the easiest paths left as they're of the six top teams. They only have 36 wins for their combined opponents. Ole Miss with three home series, but two of them are South Carolina and Vanderbilt. And then Mississippi State has only two home series left, but they are A&M and Missouri, so they have a chance to maybe sweep both of those and pick up some wins in that regard. And then Tennessee ends their season. Their last five opponents have 36 SEC wins. They're at A&M. They're at Missouri. They've got Kentucky at home, and then they close out the year with Arkansas and South Carolina. That might be the two hardest, just quickly looking at the schedule, guys, that may be the hardest last two games of anybody. Arkansas's got Tennessee, Florida the last 2 weeks. Georgia's got Florida, Ole Miss. Kentucky's got South Carolina, Vandy. That might be difficult as well. But you're talking about among the contenders, Tennessee's got Arkansas, South Carolina. That's a pretty tough last six games in the SEC for them, looking down the road in a few weeks.
Actually, I had it right the first time. I was misreading a column. Tennessee has already played Alabama. I had Tennessee winning 3 against Missouri. So switching that back, it goes back to what I had the first time around. So here would be the win totals and the seeding. Vandy, Arkansas, Tennessee at 20 each. The seeding would go Vandy 1, Arkansas 2, UT 3. South Carolina, Ole Miss, or South Carolina, Mississippi State tied at 19. Carolina would be the 4 state, the 5. Ole Miss would be the 6 at 18. Florida would be the 7 at 17. Alabama, Georgia tied at 15 wins. Doesn't really matter there because the 8, 9 play each other, but just for the record, Alabama would be the 8, Georgia the 9. Kentucky the 10, Auburn the 11 at 12 and 10 wins. LSU 10 wins gets the 12. A&M 9 wins gets to 13. Missouri 6 wins get to 14. So my apologies for confusing everybody, myself included. But I had it right the first time.
How many wins do you have projected for Kentucky?
I have Kentucky projected for 12 wins, which I'm glad you said that because that's the next thing I was going to get to. I don't know that Kentucky will get in with 12 conference wins.
That was my question. I think they have to have 13. I think if your projections and saying that Alabama and Georgia are going to win 15 games, those are no-brainers. They're definitely going to get in. That's 9 teams in. No, if that happens, that's a lock. You can write it down in ink, Sharpie, whatever you want to do, paint it on your driveway. There's no way a 15-15 team in this league's not going to the NCAA tournament. So if you're saying that those two teams are going to tie for 8th with 15 wins, that's 9 teams. That's a lock. The 10th team, Kentucky, with 12 wins, and those teams below, they would have to win in Hoover, in my opinion, to get in. I just don't think anybody with 13 wins, less than 13 wins, are going to get in the NCAA tournament. Plus, they don't have the resume. They have a good win over Louisville, but then they got blasted by Louisville the other day. That was a chance for them to really help. The series that they need to win, they got swept at Mississippi State. They did, and then they've lost. They lost 2 out of 3 at Georgia. I don't know. I mean, I know they've got Alabama this weekend, but their last 4 weeks are at Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina, and at Vanderbilt. And if they don't win this series with Alabama this weekend, they're probably not going to win another series. And so they're probably going to be, on the outside looking in.
Yeah, and For Kentucky, here's what I've got happening. I've got them, and I think this weekend's key. I've only got them winning 1 of 3 with Alabama. I've got Alabama pulling the road upset. I really like Alabama and the way the pitching is starting to shape up. I've got Kentucky winning 1 of 2 or 1 of 3 at Tennessee. I've got them taking 2 or 3 home against Florida. I've got them winning 1 of 3 against South Carolina. I've got them getting swept at Vanderbilt, where they've had fits in recent years. For some reason, the league keeps matching those 2 teams up at the end of the year when Vanderbilt's out of exams, and that's when they start to really roll. So, if Kentucky can just get, take the series from Alabama, pick up 1 against Vanderbilt in there somewhere, I think that Kentucky's got a plausible path. But right now, based on what I've got, which again is not the way it's going to shake out, I've got Georgia winning, getting that 9th spot, they and Alabama in some order, and Kentucky being just left out.
Well, I think Georgia's got a case. They've got 2 wins over Clemson. I know Clemson's kind of struggling right now, but they got 2 series. They got a series win over Vanderbilt. They got a win over South Carolina. They got 2 wins over Clemson. They still got a couple of opportunities with Tech. They still play Florida. They still play Arkansas. They still play Ole Miss. I mean, they've got Georgia, if they're 15-15 or 14-16 in this league, they're going. I mean, that's just, they're in. And, I think this is, you mentioned Kentucky. I think it's a big weekend for Alabama, going on the road to Lexington, where they haven't won a series since 2004. A chance to go on the road. I know the weather's supposed to be really cold up there this weekend, much like it is where you guys are in Nashville, and balmy 36 here in Tuscaloosa this morning. So little bit of winter's time still hanging around. But for Alabama, they announced their pitching rotation yesterday, and it did not include Connor Prelip. It's Tyler Ross, Dylan Smith, and TBA. I think they're going to go with Prelip in the bullpen for right now, and I'm not sure what they're going to do on Sunday. I guess that depends on how the weekend goes. Do they bring Antoine John in? He was not very good last weekend against Auburn. That's being nice. He was not real good the weekend before at Texas A&M, and he wasn't real good the weekend. Well, he missed the Tennessee series. So he's coming back from his injury. He hasn't pitched very well. And, they got to get Dylan Smith a win. I mean, is this guy going to go the entire year? They're going to lose every game.
I'm wondering. Smith. I know he's pitching great, but yeah.
I mean, Taylor Gilbo for Alabama a couple of years ago was 0-9 in the SEC. He lost every game. So it's definitely happened. I mean, but they got to get this guy a win somehow, or they got to score. They got to score, and he's got to pitch good, or match them up, because when they don't score, he pitches fantastic, and when they score, he pitches awful. So they got to match up this weekend with that. But I thought it was interesting that Prelip's not in the rotation this weekend. Going to use him out of the pen. They did have to use, unfortunately for them, but not at great lengths, both Shamblin and Will Freeman Tuesday night to get past, goodness gracious, 4-29 North Alabama, where they had to rally to win in the bottom of the 8th against one of the worst Division I teams out there, but they won. That's a game probably last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, they would have lost. But they found a way to win, but they did have to use 2 of their better relievers in that game. And they used Chase Lee for 15 pitches at the end. He had to come in the 8th inning and get a double play and keep them in the game. And then when they took the lead, easy 9th inning, a 3-strikeout, 10-pitch 9th inning to get them out. So 3 of their better arms in the league they used Tuesday night against North Alabama. So, but a big weekend for Alabama, a big weekend for Kentucky. The home teams won the last 8 series, so that would favor Kentucky. But you look at Alabama, they haven't won up there in 17 years. So you could always say, well, the odds are with you. It's bound to happen at some point in time. And they played well on the road this year. They won a game at Arkansas and they swept A&M. So another chance to go on the road and get a road series win and bolster their NCAA chances.
Well, I left Dylan Smith out of our pitcher power rankings this week. Maybe that's unfair. The guy's had statistically a really good year. 2.92 ERA, 52 1/3 innings pitched. Like you said, hasn't won a game yet, but he struck out 69 and only walked 13. Those are outstanding numbers. And frankly, you throw a couple of wins in there, and he's in our rankings. That's not necessarily his fault. I've always had a pet peeve about how we look at pitchers by win-loss records, because if a guy hits 400, We're not saying, the team went 0 and whatever when he got a hit. We look at the stats and let them speak for themselves. So maybe I've fallen in the trap and was unfair to Dylan Smith a little bit myself, but he's had an interesting season in that regard.
He has, and I look at that. I mean, that's a key thing I look at for pitchers is, why are you not winning? And you go look and, they did score 4 runs for him at A&M while he was in the game and a couple of runs for him at Auburn while he was against Auburn while he was in the game. But his first 7 starts, they scored 8 runs with him in the game. Now he's made 9 starts and they've scored 16 runs for him while he's in the game. He didn't pitch well against Auburn last week, gave up 3 home runs. He didn't pitch well at A&M. He had the lead and couldn't keep it and couldn't make 5 innings to get the win. Didn't pitch well against Tennessee. A lot of that had to do with Tennessee. They're a patient bunch of guys. Good gracious.
Yeah, they're the most patient team in the conference. I think they lead the league in walks. Yeah.
Dude, they will take a pitch in a heartbeat. They are not a hacking first pitch team. They do not have a Vladimir Guerrero in that lineup. They are picky hitters, and they do lead the league in walks, and their pitchers lead the league in fewest walks. So that has a lot to do with it. But you got to win. It was kind of like, what was it in the 70s? Steve Carlton won 20 games and won the Cy Young, and the Phillies won 50 games that year. He won like 2/3 of their games, but so there is some merit but he won. But I think you just have to win, and he needs a win, and Alabama needs a win when he pitches. And so they haven't had one in the SEC this year when he pitches. So they need a win, and they need to get things going with him on the mound, because he has pitched good. His numbers are good. They're not great the last couple of weeks, but he has a lot of the season pitched really well.
I'm looking at his bio on Alabama's official site. The games in which he has pitched, Alabama has scored 29 runs and given up 36. And really here's been his problem. I don't know what the score was when he left the game, but he goes 4 2/3 against McNeese State. So I don't know if they had you need to go 5 innings thing in effect there. They probably did, since it wasn't a midweek. So if he has the lead, he's 1 out short of getting a win. The same thing happens almost against Tennessee and A&M. Well, no, not against Tennessee because they lost the game. But A&M, he goes 4 1/3 and a 6-3 win. So really, what he needs as much as anything is just to get maybe another out or 2 when they've got the lead, and he picks up a couple of wins.
Yeah, I think in that Tennessee game, he left. It was 1-0 when he left, but they drove his pitch. I was at that game. They drove his pitch count up tremendously through 92 pitches.
They have the habit of doing that.
And so he leaves the game. It's 1-0 when he leaves in the 4th inning, so he can't get the win. And then the bullpen, they I don't like to criticize coaches, but they kind of mishandled the bullpen that night a little bit to me at the end of the game, and gave up 4 in the 7th, and then Alabama came back to tie it, and then they gave up 4 in the 11th and lost. So that's the Tennessee game. He just couldn't get enough innings, and he wouldn't have gotten the win anyway the way it played out, because the bullpen couldn't hold the lead for him. He lost to the College of Charleston 1-0 on a pop fly home run. The game he pitched against Wright State, they won. I think he pitched the 8-7, 11-inning game. The bullpen didn't hold the lead for him there. Let me check that box score real quick. No, he pitched the game they won 1-0 in extra innings. So he's got back-to-back games where they won 1-0 and lost 1-0. So that really wasn't his fault in those. I mean, he pitched well enough to win. One week they couldn't score for him in 2 weeks. And you mentioned that McNeese State game. He went 4 2/3. And they took him out in the 5th inning when he gave up runs. They were ahead 3-1, and he ended up being charged with 4 runs in that game, or 4 runs in that game. It took him out, and he didn't get the win in that game either because he left not with the lead, and then the bullpen couldn't hold, and then Alabama came back to win. So there's 3 games that right there that he could have some wins, but sometimes pitching is good luck and bad luck, and he's had his share of that. Maybe the last 5 weeks of the season, he'll have his good luck, and I think they'd be real happy if he finishes a year 5-0. I don't know that that'll happen, but I think with the bad luck Well, he hadn't won a game all year, and then he wins his last 5. Those might be the most important 5 that he could have, So it's just kind of have to see. But this will be a key weekend for him and for Alabama and Lexington.
I think Dylan Smith chose the wrong Alabama school because Auburn's 2-8 in one-run games in the SEC. I feel like Dylan Smith ought to be pitching on Auburn. It would be a perfect match. You take the league's toughest luck pitcher and you put him on the league's toughest luck team, and all the ends just meet there.
Well, it very well could. Yeah, Auburn is a tough luck. They're a tough luck team. I've got my one-run chart here. I'm trying to get it called up. Overall, they're 5-9 in one-run games, 2-8 in SEC play. They had another one-run game last night against Jacksonville State, and 2-5 Auburn is in extra innings. So you look at that, and they're just a tough luck team trying to scratch out runs. And last night they found themselves down 5-2 in the 6th inning and took the lead, and then gave up a run in the 8th and a run in the 9th, and Jack State tied it. Somehow Auburn found a way to win in the bottom of the 10th and picked up another one-run win. But a lot of tough losses for Auburn in the league, and maybe that turns around this weekend with the move of Cody Greenhill to the bullpen. That certainly will help them tremendously at the back end of the game. And can he pitch all 3 games? They probably wouldn't ask him to do that, but I certainly would think he could pitch Friday and Sunday and navigate a series and get them a chance to maybe win a series, especially at home. That would be their first series win, and certainly be their first one at home. And they're a team that hasn't played well in Game 3 either. They're 0-5 in the 3rd game of a series. Their only wins came in Game 1 against Arkansas and Game 2 against Alabama. They're the only team that has not won a Game 3 of a series. So maybe that's something that Cody Greenhill can help solve that problem for them this weekend.
Yeah, the Greenhill move has gone better than I thought. I was really concerned about Auburn bringing a guy who'd been a reliever and making him a starter. That has gone wonderfully for them. He's had one of the best years of any starters in the league, and like you said, has also gotten them a save in the midweek. Well, gentlemen, I've got to run on to the next thing. I thank you both for joining me today. We got content coming pretty much every day at southeastern14.com. It's all free right now. Of course, the podcast we do 5 days a week. We'll have another one tomorrow. Don't know what we'll talk about, but we will find something to talk about tomorrow because there's always something to talk about in the Southeastern Conference. Anyway, for Barry Allen and Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee, host of the 14. We appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you again tomorrow.